My name is Celinda Carter. I'm 31 years old. Last Thanksgiving. My mother raised her glass in front of 16 people family, neighbors, friends from church and said, "One daughter is a doctor. The other one." She paused, smiling just enough to invite laughter. "Well, she cleans houses for a living?" The room erupted. People laughed. My sister smirked. My father stared down at his plate like he suddenly found it very interesting. And me? I didn't say a word. I just kept refilling water glasses, clearing plates, moving quietly around the table. Because that's what they expected me to do. What they didn't know, what none of them even thought to imagine, was that 3 weeks later, those same people would be sitting in a ballroom with over 600 guests, watching me walk across a stage to accept an award they wouldn't even know how to pronounce. And the company I founded, the company they never once asked about, has been providing services to their favorite luxury resort for over 2 years now. They just never thought to ask whose name was on the contract. I guess you're curious, aren't you? But take a moment to subscribe, and only if you believe this simple truth: you are more than your family thinks of you. Where are you hearing this from? And what's the temperature there right now? Let me know. This is a fictional story, with some details enhanced by artificial intelligence. I hope it gives you a truly moving experience to understand what happened that night at the Thanksgiving table. You have to understand the Carter family. We lived in Brookhaven Heights, just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, a neighborhood where every lawn was trimmed to perfection and every driveway held at least 2 cars. My parents bought that house in 1999, the year I turned 5. 4 bedrooms, a backyard patio, the kind of home where you hosted dinner parties and pretended everything inside was just as perfect as it looked from the outside. My mother, Denise Carter, was 59. She had been a middle school teacher for over 2 decades before retiring early. She believed in 3 things: reputation, appearances, and my older sister, my father, Thomas Carter, was 63. He worked as a financial analyst at a regional firm in downtown Charlotte. He was quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind people respect, but the kind that comes from choosing not to get involved. His favorite line was always the same: "Your mother just wants what's best for you. Celinda, you know how she is." That was his answer to everything. Every comparison, every dismissal, every moment I was made to feel like I didn't belong at my own dinner table. And then there was my sister, Dr. Vanessa Carter Holloway, 35 years old, board-certified plastic surgeon specializing in cosmetic procedures. She owned a private clinic called Holloway Aesthetic Group alongside 2 other surgeons. Her husband, Marcus Holloway, was a corporate attorney with his own firm. They had 2 children, Noah, 6, and Ava, 4, and lived in a 6,000-square-foot home in Westlake Estates with a heated pool and a 3-car garage. My mother talked about Vanessa like she was a headline, at least 4 posts a week on Facebook. Photos from charity galas, updates about the grandkids, subtle, not so subtle bragging about Vanessa's latest procedures or Marcus's newest business deal. Her bio read, "Proud mother of Dr. Vanessa Carter Holloway." That was it. Just Vanessa. As if she only had 1 daughter. Sometimes, late at night, I would scroll through her profile searching for proof that I existed. In 3 years, I found exactly 1 photo. Easter, 2023. I was in the background, slightly blurred, carrying a casserole dish to the table. She didn't even tag me. In my parents' living room, there was a wall. My mother called it the family wall. 12 framed photos arranged in perfect symmetry. Vanessa's wedding, Vanessa's medical school graduation, Vanessa holding Noah for the first time, Vanessa and Marcus at a gala, Vanessa in a red dress, Marcus in a tuxedo. I counted once. She appeared in 11 of those 12 photos. I was in one, my high school graduation, standing between my parents in a cap and gown, smiling a smile that never reached my eyes. That picture sat in the bottom corner, partially hidden behind a decorative plant. Growing up, I was never just Celinda. I was always Vanessa's little sister. Teachers would see my last name and light up. "Oh, are you related to Dr. Carter?" She was incredible. And then, just for a second, their faces would fall when they realized I wasn't going to be incredible in quite the same way. I was a good student, B plus average, honor roll, but not valedictorian. I played volleyball for 2 years, then quit. I joined theater, but never got the lead role. I was fine, average, forgettable, and in a family that worshipped excellence. Forgettable was just another word for failure. When Vanessa graduated from medical school, my parents threw a party for over 70 people. They rented out an entire restaurant downtown. There was live music, catered food, and a speech my mother rehearsed for days. It lasted nearly 15 minutes and left half the room in tears. When I got my medical assistant certification at 22, my mother smiled politely and said, "That's nice. Celinda, can you pass the salad?" No party, no speech, just salad. When Vanessa bought her first house, my parents gave her $40,000 for the down payment. When I moved into my first apartment, a small one-bedroom on the edge of town with peeling paint and a broken mailbox, my mother asked if I really needed to move out. Wouldn't it be cheaper to just stay home and help around the house when Vanessa announced her engagement to Marcus? My mother cried for 20 minutes straight. When I brought home my first serious boyfriend, she asked him what he did for a living, then spent the rest of dinner talking about Marcus and how he had just made partner at his firm. The message was clear. It had always been clear. There was Vanessa, and then there was everyone else. For 5 years, I worked at Holloway Aesthetic Group Vanessa's clinic. It started as a favor, at least. That's how she described it. I had just gotten certified as a medical assistant. I was 22. Eager, hopeful, desperate to prove that I could be more than the invisible daughter in a family that barely made space for me. Vanessa called me one afternoon in early spring. "There's an opening at the clinic. Front desk. Patient intake. I mentioned your name to the manager. You can apply." I should have noticed the tone in her voice. That thin layer of generosity stretched over something colder underneath. But I didn't, because I wanted to believe this was her way of reaching out, of finally seeing me. "I'm doing you a favor, Celinda," she said before my first day. "Don't make me regret it." I didn't. For 5 years. I didn't. I showed up early, stayed late. I memorized every patient's name, their allergies, their preferences, their children's birthdays. I calmed nervous clients before procedures. I stayed until 9 p.m., reorganizing supply closets no one else cared about. I never called in sick. I never complained. And I never told anyone that one of the doctors in the building was my sister. I wanted to earn my place. I wanted them to see me as Celinda, not Vanessa's little sister. And for a while, I thought it was working. Then came March 15th, 2021. Monday, 9:47 a.m. I was called into the office of the clinic manager, Rebecca Lawson. She sat behind her desk with a folder in front of her and a look on her face I had never seen before. "Celinda, please sit down." I sat. "We've received some concerns about your performance. Multiple concerns. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to let you go. Effective immediately." The room tilted. "Concerns?" I asked. "What concerns from who?" Her eyes shifted toward the wall, toward the door, anywhere but me. I'm not at liberty to discuss specifics. The decision has already been made. Just like that. 5 years. Reduced to a sentence. You have 20 minutes to collect your belongings. 20 minutes. 5 years of perfect attendance, not a single complaint. And I was being escorted out the back door like I didn't belong there. I packed my things into a cardboard box, a framed photo of my parents, a chipped coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Employee," a small plant I had kept alive for 3 years. As I walked down the hallway for the last time, I passed Vanessa's office. The door was open. She was on the phone, laughing at something. Her chair turned toward the window. She didn't look up. She didn't turn around. She didn't even acknowledge that I was leaving. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. It was Olivia, the receptionist. We had worked together for 4 years. She was the closest thing I had to a friend there. "Celinda, I'm so sorry. I thought you knew. Knew what?" There was a pause. Then she said it. It was Vanessa. My chest tightened. She went to Rebecca. She told her you were a liability, that you made patients uncomfortable, that you had attitude problems and it was hurting the clinic's reputation. I couldn't speak. None of it was true. Olivia's voice dropped to a whisper. Everyone here knows it's not true. But Rebecca wasn't going to argue with a physician, especially not one of the owners. The call lasted just over 10 minutes. I know that because I stared at my phone the entire time, watching the seconds tick by, feeling something inside me slowly harden with each one. After Olivia hung up, I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot for almost 2 hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, trying to understand how my own sister could do something like that to me. I had $3,200 in debt, no job, no references I could use, and no explanation I could give my parents that wouldn't sound like I was attacking their perfect daughter. So I didn't tell them. I told them I quit. I said I was burned out, that I needed a change, that I was trying to figure things out. My mother sighed like I had just confirmed something she already believed. "Well, I hope you find something soon," she said. "It's embarrassing when people ask what you do." That was it. No questions, no concern, just embarrassment. I did find something, just not in the way anyone expected. That night, I made a phone call, not to my parents, not to friends who would tell me to confront Vanessa or fight back. I called my aunt, Linda Carter, my dad's younger sister. She was 60, twice divorced, and had spent most of her life working as a hairstylist in a small salon called Golden Touch, just outside the city. In my family, she was the example of what not to become. The story my mother used whenever she wanted to remind us what failure looked like. You don't want to end up like your Aunt Linda, do you? But Aunt Linda was the only person who ever asked me how I was doing, and actually meant it. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. "Celinda. Sweetheart. What's wrong?" I told her everything. Getting fired. The phone call. The truth about Vanessa. When I finished. There was silence on the other end. Then she said quietly, "I've been the family disappointment for over 30 years. You want my advice?" I swallowed. "Yeah. Don't give them the satisfaction of watching you fall apart, and don't give them the satisfaction of watching you prove yourself either." I frowned. What does that mean? It means live your life quietly, build something for yourself, and one day, they'll see it. They'll see everything they chose to ignore. That was the moment something changed in me. That was the day I stopped trying to be Vanessa's sister and started becoming someone else entirely, after I lost my job. I still had rent to pay. I had debt, no income, and a family that already believed I was a disappointment. So I did what I had to do. I started cleaning houses. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the future I had imagined for myself at 27. But a friend knew someone who needed help. And I needed money. Her name was Mrs. Ellington. She was 74, a widow living alone in a massive house in Westlake Estates. 6 bedrooms. More space than one person could ever need. She paid me $150 per visit. Twice a week. Cash. At first, I just cleaned, scrubbed bathrooms, mopped floors, organized closets. It was simple work. Repetitive, quiet, and strangely, peaceful. No one was watching me. No one was comparing me. No one was judging me. For a few hours at a time, I could just exist. But after a while, I started noticing things. Her house was spotless, but her life wasn't. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, a garage door that had been broken for months, a fridge full of expired food because she couldn't remember what she had already bought. One afternoon, without being asked, I sorted her bills into folders by due date. I also called a repairman to fix her garage door. I cleaned out her refrigerator and made her a fresh grocery list. When she came home and saw everything, she just stood there and cried. "No one has ever done this for me," she said softly. "Not even my own children." That was the moment something clicked. It wasn't about cleaning. Not really. Wealthy people didn't just want a clean house. They wanted peace. They wanted someone who could see everything falling apart behind the scenes and quietly fix it without making them feel incapable. They wanted someone invisible, someone who could solve problems before they even noticed them, someone who could give them control without them having to lift a finger. And I realized I could do that. On September 12th, 2022, I filed the paperwork for a company I called Quiet Haven Concierge. The filing fee was $50. The woman behind the counter looked at the form, then at me. "What exactly does your company do?" she asked. I met her eyes and said, "We make people's lives easier." She smiled like it was a joke. I didn't. The first year nearly broke me. I worked 18-hour days. I hired 2 people, Elena, a housekeeper I met through Mrs. Ellington, and Marcus, a driver who had been between jobs for months. We took anything we could get: home organization, errands, personal shopping, property management, if someone needed it and could pay for it. We did it. By the end of that year, we had 12 clients. Revenue was barely over $4,000 a month, just enough to keep things running, just enough to survive. I thought about quitting more than once. But then, in April 2023, everything changed. I got an email. The sender's name was Eleanor Whitmore. She was 63, a widow, but nothing like Mrs. Ellington. Eleanor owned a luxury resort called Silveridge Retreat, a private property with over 100 rooms tucked into the hills outside the city. Rooms started at $900 a night. The presidential suite cost more than most people made in a month. Her previous service provider had just been exposed in a scandal. Staff stealing from guests, complaints buried under bribes, reputation on the edge of collapse. She needed someone new, someone discreet, someone trustworthy, someone who understood that in her world. Reputation was everything. One of my clients had given her my name. I met her on a Tuesday afternoon. She sat behind a massive wooden desk, studying me with a calm, unreadable expression. "Everyone promises discretion," she said. "What makes you different for a second?" I didn't answer. Then I thought about my life, about my mother, about Vanessa, about all the years I had spent being invisible in my own family. "I've spent my whole life being invisible," I said quietly. "I know how to take care of people. without ever making myself part of the picture. She didn't speak right away. She just watched me. Then, slowly, she reached into a folder and slid a contract across the desk. $28,000 a month. 18 months? Can you handle it? She asked. I said yes. I had no idea if I could, but I figured it out. I hired 8 more employees. I created systems, training processes, quality checks. Everything I learned came from late nights watching videos, reading business books, figuring it out one mistake at a time. And it worked. Eleanor renewed the contract. Then she introduced me to other resort owners. Within a year, we had multiple contracts. By the end of 2024, Quiet Haven Concierge had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. By November 2025, we had 38 employees, a mix of full-time and part-time staff. We operated out of a small office space just outside the city. Revenue was approaching $2 million for the year. And yet, I still drove my old car. I still wore simple clothes. I still lived in a modest apartment. And when my mother asked what I did for work, I said the same thing every time. Just cleaning. Mom. Same as always. She never asked anything else. None of them did. I built everything. In silence. There was only one person who knew the truth. In June 2024, my phone rang late one evening. It was Aunt Linda. Celinda, she said carefully. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. My stomach tightened. Okay. I had a client in my chair today, she continued. Mrs. Hawthorne. She lives up in Westlake Estates. She spent the entire appointment talking about this concierge company she uses. Aunt Linda continued. Said they're the best she's ever worked with. Discreet. Professional. Life-changing. I felt my chest tighten. She mentioned the owner's name. She said slowly, Celinda Carter. Silence filled the line. That's you, isn't it? I didn't answer right away. Sweetheart. I almost dropped my scissors. She added softly. I had to pretend I was fixing her hair just to keep my hands steady. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. Please don't tell anyone. I whispered. I'm not ready. Her voice changed. Gentler now. I didn't say a word. And I won't. Another pause. But Celinda, I need you to know something. I'm so proud of you. I closed my eyes. And I understand why you're hiding it. She continued. I've been hiding from this family for 30 years. We talked for over an hour. I told her everything. About Quiet Haven Concierge. About Eleanor Whitmore. About the contracts. The employees. The nights I couldn't sleep because I was terrified it would all fall apart. She listened. She didn't judge. She didn't ask why I hadn't told my parents. She didn't tell me to confront Vanessa. She just said one thing. One day they'll see. That was her phrase. Her promise. One day they'll see. I just didn't know that day was closer than either of us expected. If you've ever had someone in your family make you feel invisible, like you didn't matter, I'd love to hear your story. Because I promise you, what happened next changed everything. November 27th, 2025. Thanksgiving. I drove 20 minutes from my apartment to my parents' house in Brookhaven Heights. I was wearing jeans, a gray sweater, and a pair of boots I'd owned for 3 years. Nothing expensive, nothing that would make anyone ask questions. I brought a bottle of wine, $40. A Napa Cabernet I'd read good reviews about. I already knew what would happen to it. My mother would set it aside without a word, and serve whatever Vanessa brought instead. Something more expensive, something worth talking about. I parked at the end of the driveway. That's where I always parked. The closer spots. The shaded ones my mother paid to keep perfect year-round. were reserved. Vanessa's white Range Rover. Marcus's black BMW. I had been parking at the end of that driveway for as long as I could remember. When I walked through the front door at 4:15, the house was already full. Laughter echoed from the living room. Glasses clinked. My mother's voice rose above the rest, animated, telling a story I'd probably heard 10 times before. I found her in the kitchen. "Oh, Celinda, you're here." She glanced at me for half a second before turning back to the stove. "Good. Can you help me with the gravy? It's starting to lump." No hug. No. "How have you been?" "No, I'm glad you came. Just gravy." I picked up the whisk and started stirring. That year, there were 16 people at the table. My parents, Vanessa and Marcus, their kids, Noah and Ava, running through the house like it was a playground, my Aunt Rachel, my mother's younger sister, and her husband Daniel, 2 women from church, Margaret and Helen, both dressed in soft pastels and pearls, the neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Calloway. He was a retired dentist. She used to be a school principal. And finally, Dr. Allison Green, one of Vanessa's colleagues. 16 people. I knew all of them. They had watched me grow up, watched me slowly fade into the background, watched me become the other daughter. None of them knew who I really was, and I intended to keep it that way for the first 2 hours. I was invisible. I refilled water glasses, cleared empty plates, checked on the turkey, rearranged the silverware after my mother told me I had said it wrong the first time. 4 tasks in 2 hours. 4 quiet reminders of where I belonged. Not once did anyone ask me to sit down. At one point, I walked through the living room carrying a tray of crackers when Noah tugged on my sleeve. "Aunt Celinda." "Yes." "Sweetie. Why are you always in the kitchen?" I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could, Vanessa's voice cut across the room. "Because that's where she belongs," she said lightly, laughing as if it were just a harmless joke. A few people chuckled. I caught a glimpse of Aunt Rachel's face. Just for a second. Something flickered there. Discomfort. Maybe. Then it disappeared. And the moment passed like nothing had happened. At 6:47 p.m., we finally sat down to eat. The table looked perfect. White tablecloth. Cloth napkins folded neatly. My mother's wedding china arranged with exact precision. 16 place settings. My seat was at the very end, closest to the kitchen, just in case anyone needed something. My mother stood at the head of the table, a glass of wine in her hand. She was wearing a cream blouse and pearl earrings. Her hair had been styled that morning. I knew because she had mentioned it more than once. "Before we eat," she said, "I'd like to say a few words." The room quieted. "I want to thank God for this beautiful family," she began, her voice warm and practiced. "For my wonderful husband, Thomas, who has stood by me for all these years." She smiled at my father. He nodded, uncomfortable as always when attention landed on him. "For my grandchildren, Noah and Ava, who bring so much joy into our lives." The kids giggled. "And for my son-in-law, Marcus, who takes such good care of our Vanessa." Marcus raised his glass. "And especially," she paused, letting the moment stretch, "for my daughter Vanessa, a doctor, a mother, a blessing." Vanessa smiled that perfect smile, the one she used when she knew people were watching. I felt it then. That familiar cold weight settling in my chest. I knew what was coming. I had felt it building all day, all year, my entire life. My mother turned her head. Her eyes found me, and of course, Celinda. The pause this time was different, heavier. "I have 2 daughters," she continued. "One is a doctor. She gestured toward Vanessa with her wine glass. The other one. She laughed softly, a sound meant to invite everyone else to join in. Well, she cleans houses for a living. The laughter came instantly, all around me. Margaret laughed. Helen laughed. Uncle Daniel laughed. Marcus laughed. Mr. Calloway laughed. Dr. Allison Green laughed. Vanessa laughed the loudest. My father didn't. He stared down at his plate. Mrs. Calloway didn't laugh either. She pressed her lips together and looked away. But everyone else did. 16 people. I counted. 16 people who saw me exactly the way my mother had just described. The help. The lesser daughter. The embarrassment. The room felt smaller. The sound of their laughter pressed in on me from every direction, and then something inside me shifted. I set my glass down, folded my napkin carefully, and stood up. The laughter faded. My mother frowned slightly. Celinda. Is something wrong? I looked straight at her, held her gaze. Mom, I want to thank you. She blinked, confused, for making it very clear, in front of everyone here, exactly where I stand in this family. The room went completely silent. Not the polite kind of silence, the kind that presses in on you. Heavy, unavoidable. I hope one day you remember this moment. I said quietly, because I know I will. I pushed my chair in, picked up my purse, and walked out the front door. I didn't slam it. I didn't need to. If you think what my mother did, publicly humiliating her own daughter and treating her like she didn't matter, was completely justified, then comment support. But if you believe she made a serious mistake, feel free to leave the word mistake below. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't what people say, it's who says it. I'd really like to know where you stand. As mentioned, I left 3 miles away and sat in my car in the parking lot of a pharmacy, looking out the windshield, trying to regulate my breathing. At 7:34 p.m., my phone rang. Aunt Rachel. I almost didn't answer. I thought she was calling to tell me I had overreacted, that I had embarrassed my mother, that I should go back and apologize, but something made me pick up. Celinda. Her voice was shaking. I need to tell you something. I should have told you months ago. I didn't say anything. I forwarded you an email back in August. By accident. She continued. I meant to send it to Vanessa, but I clicked your name instead. When you never replied, I thought maybe you didn't see it, or maybe you just ignored it. I told myself it didn't matter. My grip tightened on the phone. What email? Check your spam folder. The subject line is, what to do about Celinda. My hands went cold. I put the phone on speaker and opened my email. Spam folder. Thousands of unread messages. I typed in the subject line, and there it was. Dated August 8th, 2025. I opened it. It wasn't just one email. It was a thread. Dozens of messages. 18 months of conversations between my mother, my sister, and Aunt Rachel. The first one was from April 2024. Subject line. What to do about Celinda. My mother had written it. I need your advice. Rachel's wedding is coming up in June, and I don't know what to do about Celinda. I don't want her there making small talk with guests. What if someone asks what she does? I can't keep explaining away the embarrassment. My chest tightened. The next reply was from Vanessa. Agreed. She'll probably show up looking like she just came from work anyway. Just tell her it's a small ceremony, family only. She'll believe it. Another reply from Aunt Rachel. Are we sure about this? She is still family. Then my mother again. Sometimes I wish I only had one daughter. Is that terrible to say? I stopped breathing. I read that line again. And again. Sometimes I wish I only had one daughter. My own mother. I kept scrolling. June 2024. The wedding went perfectly. Vanessa wrote, Celinda didn't even question it. She actually believed the small ceremony story. She's so easy to manage. September 2024. Thomas keeps saying we should invite Celinda to Sunday dinners. My mother wrote, I told him it's easier when it's just us and Vanessa's family. Celinda brings down the mood. November 2024. Thanksgiving is coming up. Vanessa wrote, Do we really have to invite her this year? My mother replied, Yes. People will notice if we don't. But don't worry. I'll keep her busy in the kitchen. I kept scrolling. Message after message. A year and a half of conversations. Planning. Discussing me like I was a problem. An inconvenience. Something to manage. Something to hide. Then I reached the final email. Dated November 24th, 2025. 3 days before Thanksgiving. Vanessa had written it. Don't worry. Mom, after tomorrow, she'll know her place. I have a toast prepared. A toast. My chest felt hollow. It hadn't been spontaneous. It hadn't been a careless joke. They had planned it, discussed it, agreed on it. My humiliation had been scheduled. I sat there in that parking lot for 45 minutes, reading every email, then reading them again. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt clear. Like someone had finally turned on the lights in a room I had been stumbling through my entire life. All the confusion, all the doubt, all the times I wondered if I was overreacting. It all collapsed into one undeniable truth. They didn't just overlook me. They chose to. They didn't just leave me out. They planned it. They discussed it. They put it in writing and laughed about it like it was nothing. I opened a new folder in my email. I named it Evidence. Then I forwarded every single message into it. All 47 emails. After that, I drove home. The next morning. Friday, November 28th, 2025. I woke up to a new email. This one wasn't from my family. It was from Eleanor Whitmore. Subject line Rising Entrepreneur Award. I sat up in bed and opened it. Dear Celinda. It began. It is my honor to inform you that you have been selected as this year's recipient of the Carolina Rising Entrepreneur Award, presented by the Southeastern Business Council. I read it slowly. The ceremony would be held on December 18th. 600 guests. Local press coverage. And a speech. From me. I've watched your company grow from a single employee into something truly remarkable in just 3 years, she wrote. You've earned this recognition, and I couldn't be more proud to have nominated you. I read the email 3 times. December 18th, 3 weeks away, 600 people, and 10 complimentary tickets. I stared at that number. 10. And I thought about the 16 people sitting at that table the night before. The ones who had laughed. That evening, I called Aunt Linda. We talked for over 2 hours. I told her everything. About the emails, about what my mother had written, about what Vanessa had planned. I read the messages out loud, word for word. And when I finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. What are you going to do? She asked finally. I don't know. You could expose them. She said. Send those emails to everyone. Post them. Let people see who they really are. I had already thought about it. In the parking lot, on the drive home, in the quiet of my apartment. I had imagined sending those emails to every relative, every friend, every person who believed my family was perfect. Watching their image fall apart, watching them feel, even for a moment, what they had made me feel for years. But the longer I sat with that idea, the more I realized something. That's what they would do, and I wasn't them. I'm not going to destroy them, I said quietly. Then what are you going to do? I'm going to stop hiding. She didn't speak. I'm going to let them sit with what they've done, I added. How the award ceremony. I took a breath. December 18th. 600 people. Press. Eleanor nominated me. There was a pause. Celinda, she said slowly. I'm going to invite them. All of them. Mom, Dad, Vanessa, Marcus. They won't come. They will. I said. Marcus already got an invitation through one of his clients. They think it's just another networking event. They have no idea who the award is for. Silence again. Longer this time. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Then she let out a small breath. Well, then I'll be there too. Front row. I smiled. For the first time in days. I actually smiled. Thank you, I said softly. For what? For seeing me. When no one else did. Over the next 3 weeks, I wrote my speech. 7 drafts. The first one was angry. I named names. I quoted emails. I imagined standing on that stage and watching their faces as I read their own words back to them. The second draft was sad. It was filled with memories, with longing, with the story of a girl who spent her whole life trying to earn a place in her own family. The third draft was sharp, accusatory. The fourth felt too heavy. The fifth was too long. The sixth, too empty. By the seventh draft, I did something unexpected. I deleted everything, because I finally understood something I hadn't before. The final version of my speech was just 8 minutes long. 8 minutes to say everything I needed to say. I didn't mention my family. Not once. But I knew, without a doubt, they would hear themselves in every word. December 18th arrived faster than I expected. That morning, everything felt unusually quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I went to the store the day before and bought a dress. Navy blue, simple, elegant. The kind of dress that didn't demand attention, because it already belonged in the room. When I put it on that evening, I didn't feel like I was pretending anymore. I felt like myself. Aunt Linda came over that morning to help me get ready. She moved around my apartment with a kind of quiet excitement, setting things out, making sure everything was perfect in a way no one had ever done for me before. She styled my hair in soft waves, pinning one side back neatly. When she stepped away, she didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me, really looked at me. You look like a CEO, she said finally. I met her eyes in the mirror. For a second, I saw the girl I used to be. The one who waited for approval. The one who hoped someone would tell her she was enough. Then that image faded. I am a CEO, I said. She smiled, her eyes soft but certain. Yes, you are. At 6:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. I opened it without thinking. Vanessa had posted a photo. She and Marcus stood in the lobby of the Grand Regency Hotel, dressed in formal attire, smiling like the night belonged to them. The caption read, "Networking with my husband at a business gala. Blessed life." I stared at the screen for a moment. They were already there? And they had no idea. The ballroom held 600 people, 600 strangers who would soon know my story, before my own family ever truly did. I arrived at 6:30 p.m. through the speaker entrance. Everything backstage felt different, calmer, focused. Eleanor Whitmore greeted me the moment I stepped inside. She was wearing a silver gown that caught the light with every movement, but it was her expression that grounded me, steady, warm, certain. "Are you ready?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stepped closer to the curtain and looked through a narrow opening. The room was filling up. Round tables draped in white linen, soft golden lighting, people in suits and evening gowns. The low hum of conversation filled the air. And then, I saw them. At one of the tables near the center of the room, my family, my mother in a burgundy dress, sitting straight, composed, completely unaware. My father beside her, wearing a suit he'd probably owned for years, his posture slightly stiff like he never quite felt comfortable in rooms like this. Vanessa in emerald green, elegant and confident as always. Marcus next to her, relaxed, checking his phone between conversations. They were laughing, drinking champagne, living in a moment they believed they understood. I watched them for a long second, and then I stepped back. "I've been ready for a long time," I said quietly. The program began at 7 p.m. There were speeches, introductions, awards for other businesses, a video about innovation, growth, and the importance of supporting local entrepreneurs. I barely heard any of it. My attention kept drifting back to their table, watching my mother lean closer to Vanessa, whispering something that made her smile, watching Marcus scroll through his phone, half engaged in the room around him, watching my father glance around, like he sensed something shifting but couldn't explain what. Time felt strange, slow, and fast at the same time. Then, at 7:45, everything changed. The host stepped onto the stage, a familiar face, a local news anchor known for his confident voice and composed presence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "It is my honor to introduce the highlight of tonight's program, the Carolina Rising Entrepreneur Award." The room quieted instantly. This award recognizes an individual who has demonstrated exceptional growth, innovation, and impact in their field. My heart started pounding. I could feel it in my chest, in my hands, in every breath. This year's recipient has built something truly extraordinary. I stood still, grounded, quiet haven. Concierge was founded just 3 years ago with a single employee and a simple idea. A ripple of interest moved through the audience. Today, it employs dozens of people, serves some of the most prestigious luxury properties in the region, and is on track to generate nearly $2 million in revenue this year. The murmurs grew louder. Recognition, respect, curiosity. The founder of this company started with nothing. He continued. She faced setbacks. She faced doubt. And she faced people who told her she would never become anything. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle into the room. Tonight. Another pause. We prove them wrong. I closed my eyes for just a second, took one slow, steady breath. "Please welcome to the stage, Celinda Carter." I heard it before I saw anything. A sharp, unmistakable gasp. My mother. The curtain opened. The light found me instantly, and without hesitation, I stepped forward, into the light. I didn't look at them. Not yet. I walked to the podium, each step steady, controlled. I adjusted the microphone with calm hands and let my eyes sweep across the room. A sea of faces looked back at me. Most of them were strangers. But in the front row, I saw Eleanor Whitmore smiling, her eyes bright with pride. Next to her, Aunt Linda dabbed at her eyes, already emotional, and then, just beyond them, at one of the center tables, 4 still figures. My family, frozen, watching. I drew in a breath and began. "Thank you, James. And thank you to the Southeastern Business Council for this incredible honor." My voice didn't shake. It didn't waver. It sounded like it belonged to someone who had rehearsed these words so many times they had become part of her. "I want to tell you a story," I continued. "A true story about a woman who, 4 years ago, had absolutely nothing." I paused. Let the silence settle. In 2021, I was fired from my job. I had $3,200 in debt. No references, no backup plan. I was 27 years old, and I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I saw movement at their table, my mother shifting in her seat. So I started cleaning houses. I said, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Because I needed to pay rent. Because I needed to survive. Another pause. And somewhere along the way, something changed. I softened my voice slightly. I realized I was good at it. Not just at cleaning, but at understanding people. At noticing what they needed before they even said it. At making their lives easier. I let the next word linger. At being invisible. In a way that made other people feel seen. The room was completely quiet now. I built Quiet Haven Concierge with my own 2 hands. I started with 1 client, then 5, then 50. I made mistakes. I worked 18-hour days. I doubted myself more times than I can count. I lifted my gaze, and this time, I looked directly at them. There were people, I said slowly. People who were supposed to love me, who told me I would never become anything. Vanessa's smile had disappeared. There were people who called me an embarrassment. My mother's hand rose to her mouth. People who excluded me from their lives, because they were ashamed to be seen with me. My father closed his eyes. I held that moment. Let it sit. Let it land. And to those people, I said, my voice steady, I want to say thank you. The silence deepened. You gave me the greatest gift anyone could give. I paused again. Just long enough. You gave me a reason to prove you wrong. A breath moved through the room. This award isn't just for me. I continued. It's for every person who has ever been told they weren't enough. For everyone who has been dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. I straightened slightly. For everyone who has been made to feel invisible, by the very people who were supposed to see them the most clearly. I looked out across the room. I see you. My voice softened, but it carried. And I want you to know something. You are not your family's opinion of you. You are not the limitations they place on you. You are not the role they assign to you. I took a slow breath. You are capable of more than they will ever understand, more than they will ever imagine. Another pause. Thank you. For a second. Nothing happened. Then one person started clapping. Then a few more. Then dozens. And then, like a wave breaking, the entire room rose to its feet. 600 people, standing, applauding. The sound filled the room, powerful and overwhelming. For nearly a full minute, I stood there, letting it wash over me. Recognition, validation, everything I had spent my entire life waiting to feel, and finally understanding I never needed their permission to feel it. I glanced once more toward their table. They were still sitting, still frozen. They didn't stand. They couldn't. After the ceremony, the room shifted into a reception. People gathered around me almost immediately. Business owners asking for my contact. Journalists requesting interviews. Strangers shaking my hand like they had known me for years. Eleanor hugged me tightly, her voice full of pride. You did more than win an award tonight, she said. You changed something in that room. But even as I smiled, even as I thanked people and answered questions, part of me stayed focused on one thing, the entrance. Because I knew, sooner or later, they would come. At 8:32 p.m., I saw her, my mother. She was walking toward me alone, Vanessa and Marcus were nowhere in sight. Maybe they stayed behind. Maybe they left early. I didn't know. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't need to know. Her steps were slow, uncertain. Her mascara had smudged beneath her eyes, leaving dark streaks across her cheeks. Her hands trembled slightly as she came closer. Celinda. I turned to face her fully, up close. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but somehow diminished. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking in the middle. I held her gaze, really looked at her, at the woman who gave birth to me, who raised me, who had written, in her own words, that she sometimes wished she only had one daughter. "Would you have believed me, Mom?" I asked quietly. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Silence. "Would you have been proud of me?" I continued. "Or would you have just found another way to compare me to Vanessa?" Her lips trembled. She didn't answer. I nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't mean those things," she said quickly. "The emails. I didn't mean them like that." "You meant every word," I said. Not harshly, just honestly. "Celinda, please. I'm not angry." "Mom." She looked up, startled. "I'm not angry," I repeated, softer this time. And it was true. The anger had already passed. What was left was something else. "I'm just done." The words landed between us, heavy and final. I turned and began to walk away. "Celinda, wait." She called after me. "Are you still going to talk to me? Are we still family?" I stopped. But I didn't turn around. "We've always been family," I said quietly. "You just never treated me like it." And then I kept walking. In the 3 days after the gala, my phone rang more times than it had in years. 12 missed calls from my mother. I didn't answer a single one. She left voicemails. Long ones. Emotional ones. Messages that started with apologies and slowly twisted into something else. "I'm sorry, but you have to understand how this looks." "I'm sorry, but you could have told us." "I'm sorry, but this is so unfair to your sister." I deleted every single one. Vanessa sent me an email. Subject line: "We need to talk." I didn't open it. I archived it and moved on. My father called once. Just once. On the 4th day. I answered. "Celinda." His voice sounded older. Tired. "It's Dad." "I know." Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable. Just heavy. 31 years of things left unsaid. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I should have said something years ago. I should have stood up for you. I should have. You should have." I said. There was no anger in my voice. Just truth. "But you didn't." Another silence. "I know," he whispered. "And I survived anyway." I heard him take a shaky breath. The kind of breath that comes when someone realizes, far too late, what they've lost. "I still love you, Celinda," he said. "I know you do." I replied, "But love isn't enough if you don't act on it." The call lasted a little over 6 minutes. When it ended, I sat there for a moment, staring at my phone. I expected to feel something sharp, anger, bitterness, maybe even satisfaction. But instead, I felt peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because I finally understood something. I didn't need them to change in order for me to move forward. I didn't cut them out of my life completely. I didn't block their numbers or make dramatic declarations about never speaking to them again. That wasn't who I was. But I did something different. Something I had never done before. I stopped chasing them. For 31 years, I had been the one reaching out, showing up, trying, hoping. waiting for them to finally see me. After that night, I stopped. I let them come to me. And if they didn't, that was an answer too. That Christmas was the first one I didn't spend at my parents' house. Instead, Aunt Linda and I flew to Hawaii. We stayed at a beachfront resort, spent our days walking along the shore, and our evenings watching the sun disappear into the ocean. We laughed, we rested, we breathed. My mother sent a gift. I returned it unopened. Some people would call that cold. Some would say, I should forgive. Forget. Give them another chance. Be the bigger person. But here's what I learned. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing people to keep hurting you. And being the bigger person doesn't mean shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. I wasn't closing the door forever. I was just no longer holding it open for people who refused to walk through. In January 2026, I received an email I wasn't expecting. It was from Dr. Allison Green, Vanessa's colleague, one of the 16 people at that table, one of the people who had laughed. The subject line of the email was simple. I owe you an apology. I opened it slowly, not sure what I was about to read, not sure if I even wanted to. It was from Dr. Allison Green, Vanessa's colleague, one of the 16 people sitting at that table, one of the ones who had laughed. The message was longer than I expected. I was the daughter who was never enough. She wrote, the one who got compared to a sibling who could do no wrong, the one who learned early how to stay quiet just to keep the peace. I kept reading. I'm sorry I laughed that night. I told myself it wasn't my place to say anything. I didn't want to make things uncomfortable. I didn't want to stand out. I didn't want to be the person who ruined the mood. There was a pause in the message. But watching you on that stage, hearing your story, I realized something. I leaned back in my chair. It is always our place. My fingers tightened slightly around the phone. When we see someone being treated badly, it is always our place to say something. Silence doesn't make us neutral. It makes us part of the problem. I read that line twice. I'm not writing to talk about your mother or your sister. I'm writing because I recognize something in you, and I recognize something in myself. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Not about them, just about life. About what it's like to grow up in a family that never really saw you. The last line stayed with me the longest. You are remarkable, Celinda. I hope you know that. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I read it again. And again. For years, I had trained myself not to expect kindness from people in that room, not to expect understanding, not to expect anyone to step out of line for me. And yet, here it was. Unexpected, uncomfortable, real. I opened a new message and typed one word. Coffee. She replied in less than 5 minutes. Yes. We met the following week at a small cafe just outside the city. It was quiet, warm, the kind of place where no one paid attention to anyone else. She arrived first. When I walked in, she stood up immediately, almost nervously, like she wasn't sure how I would react. Hi, she said softly. Hi. For a second. We just stood there. Two people connected by a moment that neither of us had handled the way we should have. Then she gestured toward the table. Can I? Yeah. I said. Of course. We sat down. At first, the conversation was careful, polite, surface level, but it didn't stay that way for long. Because once you recognize someone who understands something you've never been able to explain, the walls don't hold up for very long. We talked for 3 hours. About family expectations. About what it feels like to grow up in the shadow of someone who can do no wrong. About the quiet ways people learn to shrink themselves just to survive. She told me about her childhood. about always being the second best daughter, the one who tried harder but was never quite enough, the one who learned to laugh along because speaking up felt impossible. And I told her mine. Not the version people saw, not the polished one, the real one, the years of trying, the constant comparisons, the feeling of being invisible in your own home. At some point, we both stopped noticing the time, stopped noticing everything except the fact that, for once, we were being understood. By the time we left, something had shifted, not just in that moment, but in the direction of my life. Allison didn't become just someone who apologized. She became someone who stayed, someone who showed up, someone who understood without needing an explanation. And over time, she became one of my closest friends. It's strange, isn't it? If you would make the same choice I did, choosing peace over revenge, choosing self-worth over chasing validation, then write yes, so I know I wasn't wrong. If you would choose differently, write no. And if you're still thinking about it, trying to understand what you would do in that moment, just write time. Because the truth is, this isn't an easy decision. Walking away doesn't feel powerful at first. It feels quiet. It feels uncertain. It feels like you're giving something up. But sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is stop fighting for a place where you were never truly valued. For years, I believed that if I tried harder, loved more, proved myself enough, things would change. But they didn't. And that realization hurts. It really does. But it also sets you free. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop loving others. It means you finally start loving yourself enough to stop accepting less than you deserve. It means you no longer measure your worth through someone else's approval. I want to ask you something honestly. Did you stay until the very end? Because if you did, that tells me something about you. It tells me you understand more than just the story. You understand the feeling behind it. And for that, I truly want to say thank you. Looking back on everything, I realized this story was never really about being humiliated at a dinner table, or even about standing on that stage. It was about something much deeper. It was about what happens when the people who are supposed to see you don't. When the people who are supposed to love you make you feel small instead. For years, I thought I had to earn my place. I thought love was something you proved yourself worthy of. I thought if I just tried harder, achieved more, became better, then maybe one day, they would finally look at me the way I wanted them to. But the truth is, love that makes you feel invisible is not something you need to earn, it's something you need to walk away from. What I learned is this: your value does not come from your family's approval. It doesn't come from comparisons, expectations, or labels. It comes from you. From the way you keep going when things fall apart. From the way you rebuild yourself quietly, even when no one is watching. From the strength it takes to choose peace instead of revenge. And if you've ever felt like the other one, the overlooked one, the one who never quite fits the role they expected, you're not alone. There are more people like you than you think. People who understand, who care, who see you. And by being here, by listening, by sharing your thoughts, you're already part of something meaningful. You're helping create a space where people feel less alone. That matters more than you realize. Before you go, I want to gently remind you, take care of yourself. Drink some water, get some rest, step outside, breathe, and give yourself a moment of peace. Your life is not just about surviving difficult people or painful moments. It's about living, growing, and finding your own light. There are still many stories ahead. Stories about healing, about boundaries, about becoming stronger in ways no one expects. And I hope you'll be here for them. If this story touched you in any way, you can support the channel in a simple but powerful way. Subscribe, leave a comment, share your thoughts, or pass this video along to someone who might need it. Not for me, but for the community we're building together. Because your voice, your presence, your story, they matter.